Thank you for tuning into the Devy Devotional Podcast, a monthly show focusing on Devy prospects, strategies, and incoming rookies. Now here's your host.
Welcome back to the Devy Devotional, where we stay devoted to Devy. I'm your host, Dynasty Coach A. As always, I'm joined by Aaron Wilcox at Aaron Wilcox86 on Twitter, and I'm Dynasty Coach A on Twitter, if you didn't know. And tonight we're going to be covering some Week 2 and even Week 1 college football, Devy football. And I'm pretty excited to do it because this is the first in-season pod that we've had in quite some time. We actually have some NFL, or not some NFL, some college football to talk about here, and it's pretty exciting. We wanted to talk about it last week, but honestly, I'm glad that we didn't. Unfortunately, Aaron had some issues and some things going on where he couldn't record. And, once Week 2 happened, I was actually kind of excited about it because so much changed from Week 1 to Week 2. We know not to overreact from 1 week, but it was truly like Jordan Addison, for example. Jordan Addison had 22 yards receiving in Week 1, and then he just completely blows up in Week 2. So I'm glad that we got to wait a little bit, get a little bit more data, get a little bit more film watching in, and then then be able to bring it to you guys tonight. We're going to be talking about some concerns that we have with certain players, some standouts, and then we'll be talking about a player that we have or that's on our radar now, and then we might even get into some class comparison as well. So we have a jam-packed pod, and we have a little bit of a time crunch, so we're going to go ahead and dive in. But first, how are you doing, Aaron?
I'm doing well, ready to discuss all this with you. And it's been nice having football back, that's for sure.
Absolutely, I've been able to watch some of the games. As a Gator fan, they've been there's been some ups and downs, with the watching of the games. But it's definitely been fun. But why don't we go ahead and start with the concerns? We'll get the bad out of the way, then that way we can get into the good guys, if that's okay with you. And I'm gonna go ahead and start with a Gator. Anthony Richardson. We both have expressed concerns before, about how we just don't necessarily think he's going to be an NFL quality QB, and nothing's changed. I know people saw Week 1, and I saw a lot of people on Twitter saying, that's it, Anthony Richardson's the QB3 in the 2023 class, and I watched that game. I'm not a film watcher. I'm not a film grinder. I did watch that game. He did not look like an NFL QB in that game. I'm sorry. He ran, a good amount. He obviously has the athleticism. He has the build. People want him to be Cam Newton. I don't think he's quite Cam Newton. Even though Cam wasn't the greatest passer, I don't think that Richardson's even the level that he was at, especially in college. And I always said it's not impossible for him to take that next step forward. It definitely crazier things have happened. But it needs to happen this year. And I've seen no step taken forward, especially when you got into the Week 2. I really didn't see it in Week 1 either, but obviously they won the game. I mean, it was promising, whether you're a Gator fan or a Richardson fan or whatever, it was promising. And then Week 2, it just looked like last year, whenever, nothing has changed. He just has no... He's not a passer of the football, What do you think? Save me, because I'm just going to keep talking about how he can't throw the ball.
It's one of those things where he has the tools to do it, but he just doesn't have the consistency yet. And I think that's the biggest barrier. That was the biggest barrier for him earning that time last year too, right? It's not that Emory Jones was this elite quarterback, but it was more so this Anthony Richardson development of his consistency as a passer was not there. So yeah, definitely has the tools. NFL might have interest in it, but it just reminds me so much of Malik Willis from this season. And I think that there's going to be some growth this season. There's going to be growing pains with that. And Richardson, we should be considering him maybe a 2024 prospect, because at this rate, it doesn't seem very likely he'll declare this year. I don't think he would lose the job. He is a good player. Is he a good pro prospect? I guess is another question. So that's very much in doubt right now. So NFL loves tools, but it showed us this year, if you have some tools, but you're not truly elite, it's not going to get you there. You got to be able to pass too. So
Yeah, and I'm sure he doesn't want to be a third or fourth or fifth round pick. So, that's probably not what he's going for. I definitely agree with you that it's probably going to be more of a 2024 thing, if anything. But his numbers so far, his passing numbers so far, 52% completion rate, 3.7 adjusted yards per attempt, 0 passing touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. So that just goes to show you that it's not quite there yet. And I mean, yes, he's had some good games, like some good quality teams to play against. So, you can say that, but once again, those numbers just don't cry out NFL stud anytime soon. So I think we need to see some growth.
Absolutely. And I mean, that Utah game really did get people hyped up. Everybody was waiting to see him take that next step and, pull off a win against a good program. And he did that, but he didn't necessarily do that with his amazing precision passing. So
Right.
He was much better, 70% completion percentage, I should say, for that game. And I mean, he flashed, I think he threw maybe a 2-point conversion, things like that didn't show up in the touchdown column, but still, he's got a ways to go for sure.
I agree. Who's your first concern?
Yeah, I will say that first concern, Titus Swen, running back Wyoming. And this might be a little deeper play for Devy folks, or more just a C-to-C conversation we need to have. But this Wyoming offense is just bad. It's bad to start the season. Quarterback play is not there. The whole team talent isn't there. They're missing guys like Nair, and it's not going to be completely his fault by any means, but he banged up his ribs, and now it's going to be so hard to trust him in lineups this season. So he's not going to have the type of production that would warrant NFL consideration. And he's not also going to really be able to be a great option for us to put in our lineups. So I think that against lower level matchups, sure, he's maybe a flex player going forward. Maybe he will figure it out. But again, a deeper play, Titus Swen is just not really performing up to expectations thus far.
Yeah, nothing really jumps off the screen when you're talking about him. It's he doesn't really catch the ball very much. He doesn't really, his PPR points per touch are fairly low. Under 1, which is you really want your studs are usually around like 1.2, 1.3, 1.4 PPR points per touch. So you want to see definitely more than that. Only a 5% big time run rate. That's one thing that I love with these running back prospects. So you're just not seeing a lot of like explosive nature to his game. I definitely agree with you. I'd be concerned as well. And like you said, it was a deeper one. So I'm glad. Like I don't want to always talk about the same players or anything. So I'm glad that you're digging deeper here, though.
Absolutely, and I have a couple shallow guys too. If we want to hit on them, just some maybe obvious concerns out there.
Yeah, and this one actually makes me pretty sad, but it's a player that I've been a big fan of. It's Dante Damas Jr. I think that the injury was always a concern. But then I started getting hyped up again because people were saying he's back. He's going to be playing week 1. Everything looks great. He's healthy. And so I got back in, even though I was originally like, oh, after that injury, he might not play again. Well, once I started hearing that he was healthy and everything, I was like, yeah, I'm back. I'm 100% in. And man, things just don't look great. Maybe it's going to take a little time with the injury. And I get it. Like that injury was disgusting. We've talked about it before, on the pod. But he's barely done anything. And I mean, he was a stud. Like he was the number 1 receiver on that team, and now he's averaging like 20 yards a game. So it's only through 2 weeks, but I'm definitely concerned.
Yeah, not a great look. And we know Maryland can put out good wide receivers, and we know that he was good, like you said, the wide receiver 1 there before. But he's not doing it yet this season. I actually think that he's a good buy low, though. If you think that he is a good football player and he's starting off so slow, there's going to be people, rightfully so, putting him in that concern category. And I mean, I'm concerned as well to a certain degree, but coming off ACL and probably other ligamentous and or structure damage to that knee, it might take a little bit this season for him to get up to speed. And maybe he's not going to be that day 2 guy. Maybe he is one of those day 3 guys who is really dependent on being in the right system, whatever the case is. But he should get his athleticism back to pretty good levels by the time we're talking about athletic testing. So that would be nice to see him finish strong this season, test really well, and then maybe some NFL teams will take a chance on him. So I think we need to be concerned, but maybe a decent buy low even.
Yeah, I mean, I have him in our C2C league, and I'm definitely not getting rid of him unless somebody, offers me something that is probably ridiculous at this point because, he's not really worth all that much. So I hate it. I do hope for the best and that he can come back. But, I mean, I also know that sometimes those injuries just completely, can sap a player. And like I said, he needed this year. So if he can't get back by, like, mid-season... Now, I feel like if he can get back by midseason, maybe he's going to be okay. Like you said, he'll be fully healthy by the time the combine comes around, that kind of thing. But if it takes the entire year and he has to prove himself at like the Senior Bowl or the combine or whatever, that might be a different story. Who's your second most concerned player?
Yeah, well, I would say, very concerned about Titus Swen, but he's just such a deep play. We need to go a little bit shallower here. And it is somebody that I know you probably wanted to mention. It's Quentin Johnston, TCU wide receiver, right? We can both discuss that one if you have stuff to add there, because he's just kind of blowing it. He's just been inconsistent to start, and you know what? A lot of it has to do with the team as well. But I mean, even when they were throwing, they were not heavily utilizing him. I know they wanted to get him the ball. I don't know what's going on there. A messy start to the season for TCU. I think he'll turn it around, but man, is it going to be enough to really vault up rankings, vault up teams' boards? I don't know. I really don't. So at this point, I have to be very concerned about Quentin Johnston. And I was never a truther. I know you definitely were not. And there were some people out there who were saying he was a wide receiver 2 in this class, or wide receiver 3 probably after the top 2 guys. But yeah, that was always a bit bold for me. I did like him, and now I have to back off him a little bit. He's got to fall down the rankings. And if you're not bumping him down, I think that it's a little bit of a take lock at this point.
Exactly, and like you said, we've both kind of been lower on him. I feel like I've been one of the lowest on him. At the very least, and not to say that I hate him. I'm not saying I thought he was going to be terrible or anything like that, because it definitely was not that. I just wasn't as high on him. I had him as like my wide receiver 8 or something like that in the class, and people, like you said, were putting him around wide receiver 3, and I didn't quite understand it. Now that being said, I had him on my list originally, and I took him off just because I want to give him a little bit more of a chance before we completely write him off or anything like that. Because they only threw for 130 passing yards in week 1 as a team. And so he only had 22 passing yards. That's not great. Like, I wish he would have still had like 50 or 60 or whatever. But, it's not like they did anything. Just nothing was clicking. And then in week 2, he kind of did the same thing. But I think they pulled him after like the second quarter, because they were up so big on I forget who they were playing now, but Tarkleton State or whatever the hell it was. So I think I just want to give him a little bit more of a shot, like give him one more game, and then I'll officially put him on my concerns. I was already concerned with them, so like it's hard to be much lower than I was. Like I still think he has a chance to be a decent player, but I think I was also excited about Kendre Miller, and he hasn't truly like done much this year, because I feel like that offense is just really struggling, which kind of sucks because I know people were really getting excited about that offense this offseason. So we'll have to see what happens.
Yeah, it's an offensive concern for sure. Kendre Miller started to put together a little bit more consistency there in that last game, and even freshman Jordan Hudson, he was making some plays out there. So yeah, we can't give up on these guys. It's been 2 weeks for the majority of these players. So definitely it's not a panic sell by any means, and we have a small sample size to work with, but not the greatest start here for sure.
Exactly. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get this one out of the way quickly. My next concern is Tank Bigsby. like you didn't know it was coming, right? But so many people were on the Twitter timeline like freaking out after week 1. Tank's back. He's back. He's just going to be amazing. He's the RB2 in the 2023 class. Dude played Mercer. He played Mercer. When I go to like sportsreference.com, I can't even click on Mercer because it doesn't have it in the database. So like, that just goes to show you who he played in week 1. And yes, he had 147 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like most of that came on one big play, but that's what you want from your running back. So I'm not even going to like hate on that or anything like that. Like I like the big time run rate. So I'm not going to try and take away stats or anything. I'm not doing that. He had 147 yards, 2 touchdowns against Mercer. In week 2, he had 51 total yards and a touchdown, 51 rushing yards and a touchdown against a Mountain West San Jose State. He had 7 rushing yards at halftime. Like, this is your king? So, no. Obviously, I'm being a little crazy, but I don't think he's at that level. You know, he's not the RB2 in the class. I don't even think he's the RB5 in the class. And I just think that you should have concerns unless he just completely blows up. But I went back and looked at last year. He started last year off with over 100 and something rushing yards in each week, his first 2 weeks. Actually, his first 3 weeks. And then he was garbage after that. He didn't surpass 68 rushing yards for like the majority of the season after that. And, you know, like a lot of the games were like 18 rushes for 68 yards. Like, that's just not what I want from my stud running back. So I'm concerned officially. If you didn't already, you know, if you haven't figured that out from the first, 18, 22 pods, whatever we've had.
Right. He was on the concern list before the season. Now we're in the season. He's still there. And yes, you've fulfilled your contractual obligation to mention Tank Bigsby. So well done. Well done.
Thank you.
But I agree there. I'll give people another bigger name as well. Jermaine Burton, Bama wide receiver. But to be honest,
that was the next one on my list.
Yeah. And to be honest, though, we could throw out like all the Alabama wide receivers into that group. I mean, even Trayshawn Holden, who started off well, I think he's going to fade. I was just listening to Campus to Canton podcast today, and they were talking about the fact that Trayshawn Holden, he might be a backup going forward. It's like that's how much the depth chart
just in a matter of 2 weeks.
Yeah. Right. And that's because Ja'Cory Brooks started to step up at the end of last game, and that was really good to see. And Jermaine Burton, not really impressing, but still, I don't see him going to the bench as much as I probably see Trayshawn Holden. But it's to be determined. Maybe Burton also falls out of favor there. And once they get JoJo Earl back, they have Ja'Cory Brooks, Earl, whoever else they want, whether they keep Prentice there, whatever the case is. So I have some concern. I think we all have to be concerned. And if we're starting him on the C2C side, it's only a desperation start. It should not be a confidence. Oh, he's the Bama wide receiver 1. He just has not proven that yet. So I like that he was a favorite in the red zone week 1, but that's not going to happen every week based on what we saw against Texas. So hats off to Texas, really shutting down the passing game for Bama. And Bama's offensive line looks to have some struggles. But none of that is making the case for Jermaine Burton. I mean, he's still disappointing regardless of the struggles that Bama has had thus far.
Yeah, I had him as my next player here. It just 7 catches, 45 yards, and 2 touchdowns through 2 games. It's just not. It's not what you want to see. Everyone, including myself, bumped him up when he got the Bama boost. You know, when he got to Alabama. It was hard not to move him up your rankings, but he was already pretty low in my rankings because he basically did nothing at Georgia. And you're going to say no one's done anything at Georgia, but I've said it before. Brock Bowers like doubled him up on the same team. You know, it's just like, how do you get doubled up by a true freshman tight end and then and then be called like the god of Alabama? You know, like, I don't see it. So if he had gone out and just blown up, then obviously I would have been wrong. But I was just always a little bit lower on him. And now I'm actually kind of mad at myself for even bumping him up just because he went to Alabama. Although, like I said, I had him pretty low. I don't remember exactly where, but it was definitely not where a lot of people had him. But honestly, like, just to give a little bit or play a little bit of a devil's advocate here, the offense has not been great. The passing offense has not been great. Bryce Young's looked pretty good, but they haven't quite figured out the receivers. I don't even think the coaches have figured out until maybe now, like, who they actually want on the field. There's been 7 receivers, running around playing, and I think they're truly trying to figure out like what the best mix is. So I don't think it's all Burton's fault, but he's definitely, I don't think he's going to be a stud. And if people were including him in the 2023, wide receiver mix, then, like they might be a little, that might hurt a little bit when you're, talking about, some of these players. Like, I'm not as high on Tank, Quentin Johnston, Jermaine Burton. Like, you're starting to hurt the class a little bit when you start thinking that way. And the class is going to be fine. It's a good class, but people are thinking like you're going to be drafting studs in the 3rd round or something like that. I don't know if it's going to be quite that good.
Right. Maybe not to those levels, but we have a long season ahead of us. And like you said, not great stats for Jermaine Burton, but he's also 4th on the team in receptions, 3rd amongst the wide receivers. And he's not far behind Colby Prentice and Trayshawn Holden. So we shall see what ultimately ends up happening there. And I don't think that you were wrong to bump him up, or any of us were wrong to bump him up a good amount because of the transfer into Bama, because he was a talented recruit, because he was very much injured all last year. So you can't really look at the stats and just say, this freshman tight end was just way better than him. And it's not a 1-for-1 comparison there. So there's definitely still some hope for Jermaine Burton. I'm not panicking, but I am concerned. For sure.
Yeah, I just looked. I had him as my wide receiver 6 in the class before the season. I haven't changed my rankings yet because I really want like 2 or 3, maybe even 4 weeks before I like truly start messing with the rankings too much. Just because a lot of these teams have played your Mercers and your, all those kind of, like, I just want to see some like actual games in these stats before I truly start changing things. But it's not a promising start for those guys. That was the end of my concerns. I tried to make it a shorter list so that we can get some good notes here with some standouts. Do you have anyone else before we move on?
No, I'll list 2 names, but I won't go into depth. Byron Cardwell, he just needs to separate himself from the competition more there. I think he actually does going forward, but you have to be concerned, of course. But I've always trusted in his talent, and I still believe that he's the most talented of the guys who are getting significant playing time right now there. And then even Donovan Edwards, just a smidge. Now it's early. He still needs to develop, just like Will Shipley. These guys going into their 2nd season, they just need development as runners. And it seems like he's going to be kind of hard pressed to get a ton of work with Corum there. And Corum operating as the 1A, it's tough. When they start pulling the starters, they also pull Donovan Edwards. So if he's not getting that many carries and he's getting pulled in blowout games, it's like, ooh, that kind of limits his upside and just his startability week to week. So for the future in Devy, do not sell low, do not panic. For maybe C to C, especially from a starting week in, week out standpoint, there should be some concern there.
Who could have seen that coming? Who?
Yeah. And Corum's good. He's always been good, right? So.
No, we have fun here. No, I agree, and I mean, I'm also not. I still like Edwards. I think he's doing just fine, and but it's just like you said, he's not getting quite the run that maybe people thought he was going to get, and some people thought he was going to even jump over Corum, and I definitely don't see that happening this year. So maybe in the future, but not right now at the very least. Why don't we go ahead and start with one of my standouts? One of my favorite players from the offseason that I touched on multiple times on multiple pods, Drake May. What is it going to take for you to finally admit that he is the one? No, just kidding. No, now he's played 3 games, so like I guess he has an unfair advantage over some people, but he won the starting job easily in the offseason. He has a 74.2% completion rate, 930 yards passing, and 11 touchdowns with 1 interception through 3 games. Like I said, what more do you need, Aaron?
I just need him to play some good teams. That's all. No, but I've been super impressed by him, and he's got to rise up, right? It's Caleb Williams, and then there's like Quinn Ewers as question mark. I think he's showing some good flashes, and now he's hurt, unfortunately, with that shoulder, but that should only keep him out 4 to 6 weeks. But then we have Drake May, who easily rises in the class to be at least the QB3 right now. I think that's very fair to slot him in there. He's looked really good. He's flashed all the traits that people were anticipating him to either develop into or just show from high school. So he solved a little bit of the mobility concerns that I had. That was probably the only concern, really, besides the fact that he was just so unproven and that UNC failed to put Sam Howell into significant draft capital. So I think this is a great start for Drake May. I really want to see him keep it up, and that's without having Josh Downs. I mean, he's had Josh Downs a little bit, but Downs has been out the last 2 weeks. That's his main target. Everybody else there is unproven. So considering Drake May is doing that with backups and or just super unproven guys is impressive. Absolutely.
Wait, didn't Appalachian State just beat what was it, Texas A&M? A&M?
I'm not a big App State guy. I know crazy stuff happens, but
I'm just saying, didn't they just do that? Didn't they just beat a top 10 team? And Drake May had like 400 passing yards and 4 tutties against Appalachian State in week 2. So I just saying.
Yeah, no, I mean that's an excellent point there too, and I think that shows the Texas A&M dysfunction just as much as it shows UNC. But UNC barely won, right? I mean,
they also don't even have Josh Downs. Josh Downs has been out. Like, imagine if he had Josh Downs right now.
Yeah, true. No, exactly. I mean, I agree with the Josh Downs thing because he's such a stud. I need him back. I have him on both of my C2C rosters. I know. I curse all the players I draft, right? But yes, we need Downs back, and then Drake May's numbers should continue to be really good as well. So
no, honestly, like I know you were always into him. You just didn't know if he was going to be a starter. So I'm just giving you a little shit, but I just I don't know. I love everything I've seen so far.
Yeah, and you know what? You love Drake May. I love Caleb Williams. We'll segue into him. I don't even need to really touch on too much other than he's just been very efficient, smooth within that offense. They haven't even had to put up a fight against the teams they're playing. It's a seamless transition, and that's with a bad offensive line coming into the season. So I'm excited. Very much looking forward to seeing how this season plays out for USC. So I don't know that I expect him to have a flawless season. He's going to have 2 more years playing in college before he goes to the NFL, though. So plenty of time to prove that he's consistent, that he has all the skills and traits that NFL teams are looking for. So after that really, really good true freshman season, he's starting it off well. So for anybody who is nervous about, hey, are we anointing him too early? I really think that he's putting the right first steps out there for 2 games into the season.
No, I completely agree with you, but you want to talk about, has he played anyone? I'm talking about Rice and Stanford. But honestly, like, the team looks great. He looks great. I didn't really have concerns with them, but I wasn't 100% sure if he was going to be in that top tier with like Bryce and CJ. I feel... Now, once again, it was Rice and Stanford. It's only 2 games, but I feel like fairly comfortable putting him up there right now. I'm not officially changing my ranks, like I said before, but I think that in a week or 2, if he's continuing at this pace, then I'll be perfectly fine moving him up into that top tier.
Yeah, and we'll definitely be watching ahead into the schedule. I mean, not that Stanford's not a pushover, but they're also But I'll be looking ahead to other teams, Notre Dame, Utah on the schedule. That'll be, actually, I think I have my schedules wrong. But they play some notable teams definitely coming up here. So, yeah, it should be interesting to see how that season goes. Who's your next guy, John?
Yeah, that'll be great. I have another QB, and it's a player that I've liked for quite some time, and it hasn't really worked out all that great, but it seems like it's starting off pretty well this year. It's Jaden Daniels out of LSU. In week 1, it didn't look amazing, but I honestly think it could have looked a lot better if Kayshon Boutte had actually like looked at the football instead of just like running, like jogging on the field. I don't know what was going on exactly with that, but Jaden was kind of running for his life, and it worked out. Like, he had I think he had 74 rushing yards. I lost my spot here. Oh no, he had 114 rushing yards in week 1. He had 209 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and no picks. So, like, once again, not the best game ever. I think Florida State's a little bit better than we were expecting, or at least I was expecting. I didn't think that they were even going to be able to stand with any team, much less like go in and beat LSU like that. Not that LSU is this like amazing team right now, but it was still a surprise. But he completed 74% of his passes week 1. In week 2, he was almost perfect. Like literally like 10 for 11. I think it was 180 something yards, 3 touchdowns, and they pulled him in the second quarter. They were like, "Get out of here. Like we don't need to see anymore." So like you might not see like great receiving numbers from like Keishon Butte once again, or Malik Neighbors, any of those players, but it was because they were too good in the beginning, and it was against like Southern Alabama or whoever the hell it was. It was not a good team. So I'm not saying like it's this amazing thing, but this is the Jaden Daniels that I thought we were going to see this year. And there was some question marks because we weren't sure if he was going to get the starting job and all that, or 100% sure. But I had hope, and here we are, and he's looking pretty damn good. And it actually is starting to look like he could be an NFL QB if he takes some steps forward this year with a good team, some good receivers around him, that kind of thing. What do you think?
Sure. Yeah, that's very fair. And he's had a solid start, not on fire by any means, but there's context to that, of course, like you mentioned. His schedule later in the season is the only thing that gives me a little pause. And maybe it's because there's a new coach there. I don't know. They play teams like Tennessee, Florida, Ole Miss, Alabama, Arkansas, Texas A&M. That's tough. I mean, if he shows inconsistency, let's say in back-to-back games, something like that, could they pull him? Yeah, I could see it for sure. Just, I don't know. It doesn't seem like things are going that smooth yet for LSU. Like they needed that big win last week, but was it a big win? Like you said, I mean, it was very low-level competition. So, and the Florida State game didn't quite go their way, though Jaden Daniels down the stretch looked pretty good. So there's promising things there. I mean, each player has risk, right? I still think he's a risky guy, but honestly, optimism should be that's reasonable with his start.
Yeah, and I think, when you're discussing price with him, for where you got him, the fact that he even has a shot at being that guy is pretty nice. He's probably undrafted in like your normal 5-round, Devy draft. And so, you're talking about like deeper leagues or, waiver wires or whatever, or, like supplemental drafts, like that kind of thing. I think I discussed it earlier, but I had taken over an orphan in a league, and the only Devy player they had on their squad was Jaden Daniels. And so at the time, I was just kind of like this was when he was still at Arizona, and at the time I'm like, okay, I don't know how to feel about this. And then he transferred to LSU. I'm like, okay, this might actually work out. And then week 1, like it didn't look amazing, but it's a lot more promising. But man, he looked great. He's starting to see that connection. And I hate when these coaches play this game of who's the starting QB and all that kind of stuff in the offseason, because I don't think they get that connection with the wide receivers in the offseason, and then they have to go get it in season. So it takes a few games. And so, yeah, it was against a lower level competition, but man, they were clicking. And if they can bring that forward and do it against the tougher competition, then I'm going to be pretty damn excited with them.
Yeah, that's very fair. And we can move to another player on my side. And in fact, I'm going to list a whole list of names. I'm not even going to touch on each one, just a bunch of names to throw out there that have impressed. And Evan Hull, Northwestern, Jordan Mims, Fresno. I'll just say the names here, like Henry Parrish, Anthony Grant, EJ Smith, Devin Neal, Jalen Berger, Zach Charbonnet, Chase Brown, Taj Brooks, Mo Ibrahim, for various reasons. And yeah, I mean, various outcomes. They have looked very good to start the season. Each one of them, I mean, there's guys there like Henry Parrish. I don't think he's going to keep it up. I don't think he's necessarily an NFL guy, a little undersized, but all of those guys have really impressed early on in the season, and makes me kind of sad I don't have more shares of a few of them, because Jalen Berger, I mean, is he going to end up doing what Kenneth Walker just did, make his way into the NFL? I think he very much is in consideration for day 2 draft capital as a running back in this upcoming class. And you start realizing there's a lot of RB talent out there right now, and that's promising. But I won't go any further on those guys. I could also talk about Kenny McIntosh for Georgia. Great receiver so far, but his rushing has been a little bit subpar. He's not really standing out there as a rusher, but as a receiving back, he's what James Cook does, but he's just bigger. So more 3-down workhorse upside potentially. But that's a long way of me saying I really like what Jordan Addison, wide receiver for USC, is doing. So all those running backs, they're fine. Kind of hard to differentiate them yet. They need to put it together with the consistency of a whole season, in my opinion, because running backs are just. I mean, you can put guys into an NFL game for one game and they look great, right? We need a longer sample or bigger sample size, but Jordan Addison is just killing it at wide receiver. So I know that was a long way of getting around to the wide receiver I chose there, but he's doing everything that we needed him to do coming into a new team. And I understand the competition level right away for USC and all that, but he's been in sync and they're going to be a deadly weapon all year long.
Yeah, I love me some Addison, and he definitely got. I had him as my wide receiver 3. I think if I was officially changing anything right now, he'd be my 2 in the class. But like that, I was like the biggest Josh Downs fan, and he hasn't been on the field, so it's hard to like it's only a couple of games, but it's hard to be like, look at what Addison's doing, and Downs isn't on the field, like and not want to move things around, that kind of thing. I'll probably end up putting Addison over Downs anyway, just because of what he's doing. But we'll have to see what happens, and hopefully Downs can get back as quickly as possible. But EJ Smith, I wanted to touch on. Like, he definitely is standing out. He was on my list. Berger, I just feel like that was the one that I might have whiffed on. Now it's only a couple weeks, but I really felt like he had no shot of doing anything. I've talked about him before, and I just didn't feel like he was going to do much of anything, because he hasn't done anything. He's had time, he's had opportunities, but man, he just did nothing with it, and now he's looking pretty damn good. I'm not going to lie. And that brings me to my next player that I feel like I've been pretty good this offseason, like with making calls of who I think are going to be good, who's going to take a step forward this year, that kind of thing. But I was pretty down on this player, and I feel like I can officially say, like, I need to take an L, and that is Raheem Rocket Sanders. Dude, it looks like a fucking rocket. Like, he is just standing out. And I couldn't see it. I mean, obviously people saw that he was explosive and he was an athlete and all that kind of stuff, but he just didn't put it on the field at all last year. But clearly he's that type of player that needs more than like 8 touches a game or whatever to do what he's doing. And I'll tell you what, he's been a workhorse for the team. He's looked explosive. He has over 300 total yards and 2 touchdowns through 2 weeks. And like, honestly, like, it kind of makes me, we're gonna get into the class comparison here pretty soon, and it makes me kind of happy because it's just another 2024 running back that we can be excited about.
Yeah, that class is looking good, and all the running backs that you mentioned there. I mean, I like the shout outs for sure. EJ Smith, legit receiving abilities coming out of high school. Emmitt Smith's son, and I honestly thought he was going to pop right away, but it's taken him so long. So understandable why he's been off people's radars. It was one that I loved him last offseason. Didn't get any playing time really. And I was like, well, now I got to fade him. And then that's coming back to bite me. And same with Jalen Berger, right? Obvious replacement coming into Michigan State. So yeah, good choices there, but ultimately the guy you just reviewed is a good one too. So do you have any more guys that you want to mention here?
I just really want to touch on Emeka Egbuka and Marvin Harrison Jr. Like, I don't think we could get away with not touching on those two guys. Like, wow. Like, just wow. That's all I can really say about it. Emeka kind of blew up. It was like a mini blow up in week 1. But I mean, really, the offense wasn't clicking that week. They only had he had 90 yards and a touchdown in week 1, but they only threw for 223 yards and 2 touchdowns. So I mean, he had like half of the offense. He was half of the offense. And then in week 2, Marvin Harrison Jr. just goes off, and Egbuka still had a decent game, but Harrison Jr. has 9 catches, 162 yards, and a touchdown, which is basically half of the passing offense. So I think we see that both of these guys can be the guy. But of course, just like last year, where you have your Garrett Wilson and your Chris Olave and your JSN and whoever else, like, there's just a lot of mouths to feed. So like, it's probably going to be this guy this week, this guy that week, and Jason's not even there right now. So God only knows what's going to happen when JSN comes back. So It's exciting. It's the offense is amazing, or will be amazing if it's not even quite there yet. They're still very young and raw and all that kind of stuff. But we were concerned, or there was concerns like very shortly before the season that Egbuka wasn't even going to be on the field week 1, and now maybe the JSN injury helped with that. We really have no idea per se, but here we are. I don't think they can deny Egbuka and take him off the field at this point. Like you have to assume, and then obviously Harrison's not going to be taken off the field either. So it just the 2024 class is looking better. Just every game, every play, and I guess we're going to be talking about that here pretty soon.
Yeah, class is looking good. Those guys that you mentioned are looking good. What now that they've unleashed Ibuka, they can't justify benching him, right? And if he rotates in and out a little bit, I'm not even going to worry about that because then he's even more fresh. And we've talked about his skill set before on this show, how elusive he is, how great he is with the ball in his hands, and he's flashing some versatility, especially in the return game this year. I know he had a very long return touchdown call back, but I mean, he just flashes that big playability. And Marvin Harrison Jr., same deal. He's flashing some big plays this year too, which we were looking for. That was one of the big things. So I like those calls. If we're talking and I'll also touch on Raheem Sanders too. Just he is another guy in that year 2 taking that next step. So we wanted to see that right away out of Will Shipley, Donovan Edwards. Haven't quite fully seen that yet from them, but I mean, we're seeing that out of Rocket Sanders, that's for sure. So, and he has receiving upside as well. I mentioned EJ Smith having that receiving background. Rocket Sanders is the same way. So, very much a souped up, it's going to be a way more accomplished version of Antonio Gibson, for example. I think they play somewhat similarly, but I mean, Rocket Sanders is just better, in my opinion. So, only other guy I really wanted to mention here was Jacob Cohen, Arizona. There's been a bunch of standout wide receivers thus far, like Jalen McMillan, Washington, Chris Thornton, James Madison. He's been tearing it up, but he's a small guy. And he's old, too. Alec Jennings, Old Dominion, been tearing it up. Torrey Horton, Colorado State. Those are a bunch of standout wide receivers. The question is, are any of those NFL guys? And I think Cohen has the best argument to say that, oh yeah, he has an NFL future or a potential at least. So keep an eye on him this season. He's definitely standing out.
I agree. We're running a little low on time here, so we'll go ahead and move on to the next thing. But I just want to touch on my last player, and that's Cedric Tillman. I had said on previous pods that I just wasn't really sold on him. He took so long to break out, and yet he broke out in a big way last year, and he just picked right back up this year, where he left off. So I'm fine with saying, like, I don't think he's going to be a stud or anything. I don't think he's going to be like a top tier guy, but I definitely think he can be a player in the 2023 class that like people can get excited about. And so why don't we go ahead and touch on these classes? With 2023 is the hottest thing ever. Like the picks are just going insane. People are deciding, like, can I trade this stud running back for a 2023 pick, or vice versa? Like, do I want to pay a 2023 pick for this stud player? And it's not always that way. But then we've just talked about 3 or 4, maybe 5 guys from the 2024 class that we love. So that class is looking pretty damn good. How do you feel about how these players are shaking out with from each class? Not necessarily comparing the classes, but just kind of how the players are looking from these classes.
Yeah, so I really think that the running back group is growing and growing and growing for this 23 class. I don't know how many of the very top end elite guys are going to come out of there. We know Bijan's great, and then Gibbs is definitely getting up there. He still needs to prove himself as a rusher, but there's just a lot of talented guys. But the depth, that's what's been really impressing me, especially of late to start the season. Quarterback play in the 2023 class. I mean, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud definitely haven't been elite to start, but they are good quarterback prospects. Hopefully they continue to put up some numbers this season and improve on what they've done. And then the wide receivers, I don't know. I think I'm with you that this class, while it deserves a lot of recognition, I don't know. Maybe the wide receivers, there's some underperformers out there so far. Even Boutte, supposed to be this elite guy. Really some weird stuff going on there. I have to say, he could have made it onto our concern list. That would have been very much warranted. And then tight ends, I mean, Michael Mayer, who probably isn't going to be a transcendent talent. He should be a good tight end. Maybe he's like a Pat Fryermuth type, who's going to be a very good tight end probably for a long time. But is he elite? Is he a game changer? Yeah, we'll see where he lands, I suppose. But yeah, the 2023 class, I'm really liking how the running backs are shaping up, but the rest of the class needs to kind of develop and fill in there if we're expecting the first and second round to be completely loaded.
Yeah, I agree. I do feel like the wide receivers are kind of falling off a little bit. Maybe the running backs for the 23 class are kind of, making up for that, so that's still going to be okay. The QBs are iffy, like that you have the top two. And then honestly, like I really do. I almost put Tyler Van Dyke on my, on my like standouts, but I wasn't quite there. Like I've already talked about how I like Van Dyke and everything, but just looking at who they've played and stuff, I wanted to give a little more time. But he hasn't looked bad, like by any means. I know there was concerns with how the offense was going to look, if things were going to change, and like he's still looking pretty good in the numbers and the stats and all that kind of stuff. So I'm pretty confident in him being maybe not at that tier, in that top tier, but like the third guy in the class. I know a lot of people aren't there, but that's kind of where I am right now. And then you get. There's not too many other guys. Like it really falls off. Like there's a pretty big tier break from there. Even my boy Grayson McCall hasn't really started off all that great. And I mean, technically he was last year, but he didn't come out. So he hasn't looked all that great starting off. But we'll keep our fingers crossed and hope that he can pick it back up right where he left off last year, because he was looking pretty damn good. So we'll see what happens there. But what about the 24 class? We've touched on some of the players that we think are kind of standing out here, but anyone else or like, how are you feeling about the class in general?
Yeah, I'm liking it more and more as the weeks go on here. I'm definitely a big fan of how this class is starting to shape up. And this should have been expected to some degree, because there's uncertainty when we're projecting 2 years out. And as we get more and more information, we fill in those puzzle pieces. We really get the stats that we need, get the film that we desire to evaluate these guys. And the wide receivers, I mean, they're really promising at the top. You got Xavier Worthy, Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Egbuka. And then after that, definitely some interesting guys who they just need a good season. That's it. I mean, Mario Williams, Bo Collins, the Alabama wide receivers. There's even guys like Isaiah Nayor and maybe a couple other guys who, they're going to be the next year, even though they're upperclassmen, they're a little bit older, who could come in and really impress in that 2024 class. And then I haven't even talked about the running backs yet. The running backs are very attractive in that class. Like, I mean, I know the running backs in the 23 class are very, very much promising. 2024 class is similar in that context. So, I mean, I think Travion's not quite as good as Bijan, but he's still really good. I would not be concerned about his start to the season. And there's a lot of other talented guys: Braylon Allen, Raheem Sanders, Will Shipley, Donovan Edwards, Devin Neal. And then there's just guys who are going to stay another year from the 2023 class. I mean, what if, I'm not saying this will happen, what if Zach Evans, what if Jahmyr Gibbs, somebody like that, McClellan, everybody's favorite guy, Tank Bigsby. No, I'm just kidding. No, but what if some of those guys stay and then they're also highly regarded in the 2024 class? That's certainly possible. And then you look at the tight end position, and we got Bowers, Trigg, Jatavian Sanders, Elijah Arroyo, Nesbitt. Wow. There's some talent there. So you start getting excited about some of these guys, and I know it's not complete yet. There's still a lot of work for these guys to do, and I assume that they won't get injured, things like that. But yes, very excited for that 2024 class.
Yeah, I really don't have much to add. It's a lot of players that we just need to see get on the field still, obviously, and rightfully so, especially with the 25 class, where we really don't have too many players from the 25 class that are really doing too much. Although Nicholas Singleton is standing out. I mean, like looking like a true blown stud from week one. We really haven't seen too many other freshman running backs, although there is one, and I thought I put him on my list, my standouts list, but I can't think of it. Oh, Quinshon Judkins.
Judkins, yep.
Yep.
Judkins has been good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
mean,
feel like there's some good players that we're not going to see all of them, but like there's definitely some running backs that are already standing out. That's really looking good for that class.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, for the 2025 class, we have Trevor Etienne, right? We have Marion Hampton. We got George Pettaway. And like you said, there's Judkins, Jaden Ott. He's looked really good for Cal. And he was actually good coming out. I just doubted that Cal could actually, put up good stats and develop a running back, but he's looked good. Jonah Coleman, Arizona. And then there's all the guys who haven't looked good or been able to show anything yet, just because of an opportunity standpoint, like Branson Robinson, Jaden Blue, Trevante Citizen, Andrew Paul, Trevante Barnes. I mean, you go down the list and there is a lot of talent in that 25 class. So don't panic if you don't see your guy stepping up right away early season. Takes time sometimes, but there's a lot of guys already flashing. And from the wide receiver group, it's another one that's going to take some time. But yeah, Luther Burden, he's at least flashing. I think that offense is going to hold him back. He's going to look really good playing for like Alabama, Ohio State next year. No, but Luther Burden, he probably should transfer, to be honest, but he'll start to figure it out because he is that talented as a wide receiver. And there's a couple other talented wide receivers who are flashing already. Antonio Williams, Evan Stewart. Those are my three guys, my top three guys, and they're already playing well. And Burden, Williams, and Stewart. So, yeah, there's some potential there for sure, but it's just so early.
Yeah, Burden's on that Wan'Dale Robinson track right now, so we'll see if he transfers or what he does. But the receiving part of that offense isn't really looking all that great. But I mean, he's actually looked pretty good, in the first week especially. I don't think he did too much in week 2, but there's some promising players. We'll just have to see him get on the field. I've learned over the past year or two that, it's just a lot of these guys just don't get on the field year one, even though you want them to so bad, or even if they do, they don't quite have the role that you want. That took me a little bit to figure out, but here we are. So we'll definitely focus on these classes and how they're shaping up each week, or every once in a while at the very least, so that we can really see where do you want to focus your picks on. Because if everyone's focused on 2023 picks, then maybe we have to go somewhere else. And we're not the only ones saying that. I'm not trying to act like we're geniuses here or anything, but we want to show you why you might want to invest your picks, and not just be like, oh, go get 2024 picks. Be like, this is why you want to go get, because Rocket Sanders is now a stud, and I was wrong. But why don't we talk about a player that is now on our radar, and then we'll go ahead and get out of here. Why don't you go ahead and get started with yours, if you have one? I know you were kind of struggling with a couple different names there, and then I'll go ahead and get us out of here after that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely struggled with that. There's just a lot of guys who are intriguing at this point in the season. A guy who hasn't really fully broken out yet, A.D. Mitchell, Georgia, just continued to flash. I know he's injured now. He sprained his ankle, and that limited his last game, but he had really solid true freshman production. From the second he stepped on campus, he was a go-to receiver for Georgia. And this year's passing game doesn't look terrible. I think Stetson Bennett, I know he's feeding, like running backs, things like that, but I do think that they can at least be functional as a passing game. And he's a 2024 guy. So let's see if, Gunnar Stockton, whoever lands at Georgia next year, maybe they can further advance this passing game. So A.D. Mitchell for me is one that is still on the fence, but I'm cautiously optimistic for him. How about yourself?
Yeah, you're talking about Adonai Mitchell, right? You call him
correct.
AD. Okay.
Yeah.
I've never heard him called AD, but I also don't watch very much football. So, but I like him. I've always thought he was kind of a standout. When you're talking about a Georgia offense, you kind of have to look at how they are in the offense and not just like the raw stats and that kind of thing. And he stands out for a lot of things, especially as a true freshman last year. So I think that he's somebody, right? True freshman last year. Okay, yeah.
Yep,
so
correct.
Okay, just making sure I'm not talking out of my ass here,
Well,
but he.
and to add to that too, I mean, his recruiting probably affected by COVID. His high school season likely affected by that, and that's why star rating might not have quite been there even as a recruit. So if you go looking him up, like who is this Adonai Mitchell guy? I mean, you're not going to see 5-star by any means, and that's probably why he hasn't got quite the attention that you'd expect to. But he's playing like he is, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, he looked good last year. I haven't truly focused in on him this year to see what he's doing. I think you said he was hurt, so maybe that's a good thing. But I like the call there. Definitely somebody to keep an eye on. Now, this is a player that I had truly never heard of. I'm new to the game, so you'll have to forgive me. Aaron knew who he was right away, so like once I gave him the name, so he knows the recruits. He knows all about that. But this is a 4-star recruit 3 years ago. And he was recruited by Alabama, Arkansas, and Mississippi State. He ended up going to Mississippi State. It's Garrett Schrader, a QB. Now he's with Syracuse. He ended up transferring over there. And I'll tell you what, he transferred because he was terrible. He was terrible at Mississippi State. He was terrible last year with Syracuse for the most part. But then something clicked in Week 12 last year against Pittsburgh, who's no slouch of a team, like the pretty good team. And it just, like I said, something just clicked. He had a 71% completion rate and 174.3 passer rating in Week 12 of last season. And okay, that's not all that exciting. It's one game. Well, he's picked right up where he left off this year, and he has a 79% completion rate through 2 games, 528 yards passing, and 5 touchdowns through 2 weeks. He also has 118 yards rushing, and he takes care of the ball. He only has a 1.4% interception rate. So even though he was never truly a prolific passer or anything like that in the past, he's always protected the ball, even in the past, all throughout his college career. Now he's doubled his adjusted yards per attempt. He was in the 6s and the 7s for adjusted yards per attempt. He's now at 12.9 this season. Now it's only in 2 games. I'm not saying run out and buy this guy and like he's going to be the next, he's going to be the second tier QB in this class or anything like that. I'm just saying keep an eye on him. He was a 4-star prospect. People obviously liked him. These teams, Alabama recruited him. He's no slouch. So he's completely off people's radars at this point, I'm pretty sure. But it's somebody I'm going to keep on my radar and just see how he does, because it could be like a Kenny Pickett-esque like ascension where he figured something out and all of a sudden he knows how to be a QB right now.
Yeah, I think you made good points as far as how he started the season. For me, maybe I just have some PTSD or something from all the podcasts in the offseason saying, he's not a good passer. He will not, keep the job, whatever kind of fear mongering that was out there. No, but I do think that there was just a lot of negative sentiment around him. And maybe it's because this is his 4th year out of high school, and he has been a pretty poor passer to this point. So the strides early in the season, definitely promising. I just want to see more. Could this be a Brendan Lewis situation where it's just a smaller sample size, not a 1-to-1 comparison, but where you get a little flash? Is he going to be able to sustain that? We shall see. That's for sure. So I will be definitely paying closer attention now that you've brought him to my attention. And those who play CFF leagues, they're these college fanatics. And I'm even in a best ball CFF league with some guys in the community, and I like it. It's interesting. It makes me think a bit different about the college game, that's for sure. And Schrader, he was kind of a hot commodity there because people did expect him to run, so have some value on the ground. Plus, I mean, whatever he can contribute as a passer. And from what you're saying too, it might be more than what we anticipated passing wise. So don't mind that call at all.
Yeah, I look for certain thresholds when I'm looking for like actual like NFL prospects, and he's meeting those thresholds, albeit in a very small sample right now in like 3 games, his last 3 games. So yes, it absolutely could be. That's why he's just on my radar. I'm not all in just yet, but we'll see. Maybe next week we'll get me there. But like I said, I'm short on time because I have to go jump on another Devy podcast. So you guys can follow me over to the Full Tilt Devy podcast if you'd like. I'm going to be talking a little bit more of these players, and I think we're going to be talking about some Alabama wide receivers, believe it or not. So we'll see what happens there. But this was awesome, Aaron. I'm so glad we got to actually talk some real college football, and I can't wait to do it again. Hopefully next week. I know a lot's going on with your life and everything else, so we'll see if we can get back next week. If not, we'll definitely be back in 2 weeks. If you have anything else, before we get out of here, then go ahead and speak now or forever hold your peace.
No, I like it. I will be very interested to see what the conclusions are on the Phil Tilt regarding the Alabama wide receiver core. That's for sure. So thanks for getting on here, John. This was fun.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Aaron. Thanks for listening, guys. We will be back as soon as possible. But for now, we are cashing out. See ya.